Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's
Good
good to see
morning.
everyone. Yeah, I was kind of looking forward to this last day, this last preaching day. But good experience. But yeah, let's just get right into it. What comes to mind when I say the word peace? And when I say the word peace, I feel like there are a lot of different images that come into our minds. Maybe for some of you, maybe there was a movement back in the 60s and 70s called, that was called the hippie movement. And a lot of what those people advocated for was peace, right? During this time, it was a very well-known time in American history, and people who actively participated in this movement, also known as hippies, considered themselves to be counterculture. They wouldn't go with the crowd. They did what they really believed in, and these hippies, they advocated for ending war, showing love, giving peace, right, and declaring peace in everything that they do. And so much of this peace that these hippies advocated for was derived from just themselves, right? They just said, oh, hey, it's gonna be okay. Relax. Like they had this very nonchalant, very relaxed kind of characteristic, and they would say peace. Everything's going to be okay. Did they know that everything was going to be okay? No, they didn't know. They didn't know. So that's what I meant. Like their peace was derived from themselves. They had no idea what was going to happen the next day or whatnot. But that's what they advocated for. And they just hoped that everything would be okay. Which brings us to what I believe many of us thought of when I said the word peace, and this is godly peace. Peace that comes from God. This word that's been thrown around in church and sermons and the Bible, and we're just like, oh, we kind of just, okay, peace, peace, peace. I understand this word. I hear it all the time. But what does it really mean? What does this word truly mean? Last week I shared a small little piece of history about myself, small memory that continues to stay with me for a few years now. And so this memory was when I was a senior in high school, and the time came when we had to submit our college applications. I don't know how long ago that was for you guys, but for me it's a very crisp memory. And so no jabs or anything, but during this time, it was, for everyone, for all the seniors, it was like time of stress. It was stress. It was a time just filled with regrets and like, I should have done this. I should have worked harder. I should have stayed up longer. And as you're inputting, our SAT scores, GPA, AP scores, extracurriculars that we did, volunteering opportunities that, and times that we spent on like weekends to do volunteer, all these things that we worked for this exact moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of what we were thinking, and this fear that was just building up in us is, what's going to happen? Where am I going to go? Where's the next step that I'm going to take? As we're looking forward into college and saying, okay, because for a lot of us, college was like kind of a defining moment of who you were. It's like, oh, you go to this school? Okay. You're this level of academic or whatnot. So this level of pressure was quite immense during our time, and our school was relatively competitive in that way. But what was so amazing at that time was that even during this time of stress and of fear, I had this odd peace in my heart. Where did this peace come from? Did it come from the fact that I was just done with school and I was like, you know what? I'm done. Like I've worked hard for these 4 years or whatnot. I'm done with school. My senior year, second semester senior, just kind of relax. Did it come from that? A little bit. I'm not gonna lie. There was a bit of relief in my at that point. I was like, okay, I'm done with school, right? Or did this peace come from God? And this is something that I thought about even at that time. This question that was lingering inside. Did this peace come from God? Did I thank Him for this peace? Because I realized and I noticed that I'm like, oh, why am I relaxed? I feel okay with the future. And that's because I had faith. I acknowledged that wherever that I was going to go, whether it was a good school, a bad school, in terms of ranking, I knew that I would go wherever God would send me. and that he has a plan for me wherever I go. And with this peace, I guess kind of I in a way I stood out from my friends who was, all caught up in that moment. And this peace that I experienced was, quite unlike anything I've ever experienced. And today we're going to be going into a passage from the book of Joshua. As many of you guys already know, the book of Joshua describes the story of Joshua, who leads Israel after the death of Moses. He leads these people into the promised land. It was at this moment in this passage where Joshua was passed down this torch, this baton, to lead the people into the promised land. If you guys can all turn to Joshua chapter 1, verses 6 to 9. Has it all on the outline up there. So this is God speaking to Joshua, and he says, "Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the left or to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate it on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Amen. So in this passage, we see that God commands Joshua to be strong and courageous. It's the repeating phrase that he says over and over. And as Christians, we are commanded today to be strong and courageous in every situation that we find ourselves to be in whatever situation that is in front of us. But the question is, how are we able to be strong and courageous? Because in this point, in this passage, God just commands Joshua, says, "Hey, be strong and courageous. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous." And we're going to dive deep into what God says and how we can really dig out how we ought to remain strong and courageous in God. So the first point that I want to go over is that God commands us to be strong and courageous because of what's in front of us. What is the situation that Joshua is in right now? The former leader is dead. Right? This leader, this Moses, he passed away, and he wasn't just a regular guy, especially in the eyes of the Israelites. He wasn't just some dude. This Moses, he was a man of God whom God used on a regular basis he was an instrument that God used to speak directly to the people. This Moses was the man whom God used to perform all those crazy miracles in Egypt, and he was the man whom God used to free these Israelites after 400 years of slavery. 400 years, and this man shows up and says, "Hey, it's time to go. I'm going to lead you out." And he leads these people across the Red Sea, and he guides and he leads these people for 40 years in the wilderness. He's not just some guy. But now this Moses is dead. He passed away. He's not there anymore. And so who's the next runner-up? It's Joshua. This baton is now given to Joshua. In verse 6, the beginning of our passage, it not only describes what Joshua will do, but it also describes God's character. That God always keeps his promises. God says, "Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land that I swore to the forefathers to give them." These words that I emphasize are very powerful. These are very powerful words. These words are binding. Right? There's nothing ambiguous with what God says here. He says, "You will lead these people." Why? Because I swore to them. I swore to their forefathers. He doesn't say that Joshua will lead these people because Joshua is so awesome or righteous or mighty or faithful. No, he says, because I swore it, and I'm a keeper of promises. I'm a faithful God. But easier said than done, obviously. Right? Of course. For God to say, "Hey, do this," and you're just like, "Okay, thanks for this great piece of advice. I'm just going to be strong and courageous." Obviously not. It's hard, especially from Joshua's perspective. Literally, from his perspective, it's an impossible feat. I can just imagine him like on a hill overlooking his people. Do you know how many people he led into the promised land? In Numbers chapter 26 verse 51, it says the total number of men of Israel was 601,730. The state of Wyoming, which is the least populated state in America, has around 590,000. Right, so the total number of men outnumbered the current state of Wyoming. The United States is a big place. And it's just men. And so estimated, there are close to around 2.5 million people. And this is an educated guess and scholars came up with, including the women and the children. 2.5 million Israelites. New Mexico contains just a little over 2 million. And I think Nevada has like 2.9 million. Like Nevada's huge, you know. Like
that's just Vegas, man.
Yeah, it's just Vegas. All of them are Vegas. But that's insane. Like really, putting that into perspective. Can you imagine yourself in this situation? Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation? And obviously, I don't mean leading 2.5 million people into the promised land, unless I don't know, right? But have you been in a situation where you were expected to step up?
Oh yeah.
You were expected to take in responsibility, to take on a difficult task, something that in your eyes it was like, I don't know how I could be able to do this. And I'm sure for many of us, it's not that hard to think of just a couple off the top of our heads. And I think that oftentimes we're able to find ourselves to be in these situations, or where it's easy to just look back and just name someone like, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember this. Immediately in those situations, we experience fear, uncertainty, a lack of self-confidence. And those are just to name a few. Now, for me personally, I've always identified myself as a relatively laid-back kind of person, if you haven't noticed, in like the short couple months that we've known each other. If you knew me back then, even just a couple years ago, the two common phrases that I would always say, these are my favorite phrases, I would always say, it's okay. And the second phrase was, don't worry about it. That was my go-to. And oftentimes those two, I would say those at the same time. I say, hey, don't worry. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Just chill. That was my mentality. My mom hated it whenever I said that. She absolutely hated it. Every time, it was like trigger words for her. Every time I said, hey, don't worry about it. Because whenever she would because when I was in college, she'd be like, hey, how was the test? I'm like, it went well. I think I did okay. And I mean, that didn't really reassure her, because she's always like, every time I said it was okay, she's like, she would always snap back without fail. She always say, you always say that. You always say that you did well, but it never turns out the way that you say.
Oh no!
Always, and that was like kind of my life. But I was like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. And so I mean, I'm not sure if you'll ever be able to meet my mom, but if you ask her, she'll say it. She'll probably give you a long monologue of the experiences that she had with me. Most of the time, she was right. Right? She was very correct in her anger that she had whenever I said those words. But nowadays, I hardly ever say those words. I think God has taught me that not everything is always going to be okay in my eyes. I might say, oh, this happened, but it's fine. Oh, this happened, it's fine. But a lot of times, it's not always just fine. I think this year, 2019, was probably the most stressful year of my entire life. The beginning of this year, I was looking forward to graduating, finishing my undergrad, finishing up all my classes, the final 2 quarters of my college years, and that was stressful. I think, honestly, I'm not even exaggerating, I think the stress that I went through caused me to become quite introverted. I'm still a little bit extroverted in my animations and my hand movements and things like that, but definitely I've calmed down a lot. Past school year, I spent most of my time in the library, just living my own individual life, like wake up early when everyone else is sleeping, and then come home, and just, that was kind of my thing. And my birthday is on December 11th, And every single year without fail, I had a final on my birthday. And I think, in a way, I thank God, because my ministry, my on-campus ministry, would like to do like little birthday surprises at midnight. As soon as they hit your birthday, like you come in, say happy birthday and things like that. They like to do that. And I told one of my friends, I was like, hey, every year I was like, hey, if you get invited to a group chat, tell them I don't want it, because I need to study for my final. And so I didn't really have those. I prioritized my academics over my friends and things like that. It was pretty sad, right? But I also understood the importance of my academics, and I focused all my time and energy on that. And once I graduated, began attending Gateway, I was given the opportunity to preach to the youth kids, and I was like, oh snap. This is the real deal now. Because in college you're like, oh, that's far away, you know, like I'm just gonna keep playing, and I'm still 22, you know, like let me live my life, you know, let me live, you know. But I was so scared when I was given that opportunity. I really was, and I'm still scared. I'm scared of making mistakes. I'm scared of leading people astray. I'm scared of not meeting those expectations of being a pastor, of being a servant of God. Because as a pastor and as just teachers, you know, we're under a lot more scrutiny than just regular lay people. But that's the responsibility that we need to take in and take responsibility for. I understand that, you know what, like this stage that I'm in right now, the position that God is giving me is not a joke. It's not. I can't just be laid back and be like, oh, you know, it's fine. Like I'm still 22. I'm still young.
Don't worry.
Yeah. I was like, no, you're not. You're not just 22. Don't let that define you. And the person you're looking at today is a very different person that you would have seen just a couple of years ago. And that's because God approached me. He opened a door in my life, and he told me, hey, it's time to grow up. It's time to step up. Be strong and courageous. So God commands Joshua to be strong and courageous. It's not a question. Notice it's not a question. It's not a request. It's not, hey, you should be this. Hey, you know, I encourage you to. No, he says, be strong and courageous. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? God is telling Joshua, and he's also telling us. He's also telling you, hey, I know what you're going through. I know what's in front of you. I know all the fears and doubts that you have in your heart. I know it's a big step. I know the weight of this responsibility. And he can go on and on about everything that he knows. He knows you. He knows us. But how can we know that? How can we know that God will be will be there for us? How can we be so sure of that? Because we know who God is. I'm sure all of us in this room, we know who God is. We know his character. God is faithful. God is love. God is our Father. We know God's capabilities. We know of these things. We know God is omnipotent. We know he's omnipresent. We know he's omniscient. He's our Father. We know God's record. He's never broken a promise. He'll never break a promise. And we know these things about him. And so God is saying, hey, you know who I am. And so that's why he tells Joshua, hey, you know me. You've experienced me. Use that. Don't fear. You know who I am. You know the kind of God that I am. We can't forget these truths. We can't disregard these things. So many times we get caught up in what's happening around us that we forget who's living inside of us. And I think this is something that we need to always continue to remember. It's not by our own capabilities. It's not by our own strength that we can be strong, that we can be courageous. We're able to be strong. We're able to be courageous because of the living God that's inside of us. That's it. And once we acknowledge that, once we are able to take that step in acknowledging who God is in our lives, then we can take those steps and say, God, all right. In verse 6, God tells Joshua to be strong and courageous because of what's ahead of him. Because life happens. God put this opportunity, God put this situation, this obstacle in front of Joshua as a means of pushing him to take in more responsibility. And in doing so, he tested his faith. He was testing his faith. And so rather than seeing, oh, what is this that's going on? Why is this happening? Maybe another perspective that we ought to take is, God, what are you trying to teach me? Why did you put this in front of me? And I'm sure Joshua had many of those questions up to God. Like, why me?
Mhm.
Why me of all people? But God is saying, because I chose you. And you're going to lead my people into the promised land. Something that Moses couldn't do. Like, whoa, that's crazy. We can't just read this part and forget about it. We can't just say, oh, hey, that was great. We can't just brush it off and say, oh, that's Joshua's great dilemma. We can't, Joshua was given this opportunity to lead 2.5 people to, what? 2.5 million people to a foreign land.
It's a really short person there.
I misspoke. 2.5 million people into a foreign land. He had huge, massive shoes to fill in. But because of all these things, because of these circumstances, God commands Joshua to be strong and courageous. How can we take this and apply it to our own lives? Is there anything in your life that you see as a big responsibility or a big fear even? I probably don't even have to ask you that question. I can just say it. I can just say it as a statement and we would know. Yeah, I'm going through something. Yeah, I've been through things. It's a given. We've all been through these things. When we are confronted with these situations, I hope that we can take that step in acknowledging that there is indeed a reason for it. Because life's not random. Things don't just happen just because. Everything has a reason. And sometimes we need to understand that God puts these things, these situations in our lives to test us, to grow us, to mature us. And in these times, God is encouraging us to continue to be strong and courageous. What are some other ways that we can be strong and courageous? What is the ultimate resource that God has provided for us? It's the Word. The Word of God. In verses 7 and 8, God commands Joshua, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. The Bible is not just something we open once a week on a Sunday, or maybe on a Saturday afternoon or night preparing our sermons. I hope not, right? It's our daily bread, and it's our daily bread for a reason. And God frequently reminds the Israelites to hold on to the commands that God gave to them. Not just every now and then, but every day. I just want to read for us a small excerpt from the book of Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 8 to 9, God speaks to the Israelites. He says, observe, therefore, all the commands I'm giving you today, so that you may have the strength to go in and take over the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, and so that you may live long in the land the Lord swore to your ancestors to give to them and their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. And going further to verses 18 to 21, God continues to emphasize to them, fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about it when you sit at home and when you walk around along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children may be many in the land the Lord swore to give your ancestors, as many as the days that the heavens are above the earth. To summarize very simply, God is saying that the scriptures are so important that we must meditate it on a day and night. We must remember these commands and diligently obey them. And if they are indeed important to us, we will remember them. Right? That's just how memories work. Right? We tend to remember things that we find value in. And let's do a small test. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Just raise your hands if this applies to you, if you know the answer. Do you remember the date of your best friend's birthday? Maybe, do you remember the date of either of your parents' birthdays? Okay. Do you remember the date of your wedding anniversary?
You better.
You better, right? The date maybe of your parents' wedding anniversary.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I know the date to my parents because every year I need to remind my dad, hey, it's coming up.
It's time, brother.
Better do something about it, right? Because my mom's mad, you know, the whole house. Yeah, but the reason why, I mean, my dad's been really good. I mean, it's a small joke. My dad's been really good lately, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason why my dad remembers every year, and the reason why we're able to remember these dates is because they're important to us. We find value in them, and we not only value, you know, these dates and these like significant events, but we also value the person that is associated with them. Right? We value our, I mean, I'm not married, but our wife's wedding like our wedding anniversary because we value our wife or your wives. And there are consequences to forgetting.
Yes, there are.
Right? If you forget that today is your wedding anniversary, consequences. Right? If you forget that it's your mom's birthday, consequences. I mean, usually it's okay if you forget it's your dad's birthday. It's kind of sad, but it's kind of true. It's like, hey, happy birthday, Dad, but with your mom's like buying him a gift or something like that. But the point is, we're easily able to remember these dates because we find value in them. We find value in our wives, in our moms, in our friends, in our best friends. In other words, if you find value in God's word, if you value God himself, you will remember. And that's not to say, hey, do you remember what you read on this day and this verse? I'm like, no, that's, you know, hopefully we're able to, but it's not always, it's something we can just memorize the Bible, right? As human beings, we are forgetful. We don't always meditate on the word day and night. We aren't always careful to obey everything written in it. But that's not to say that we don't value God, right? I hope. God's commanding us to discipline ourselves, to make every effort to remember God's word and be careful to obey his laws. Especially for Joshua, he's confronted with this huge mountain of an obstacle in his life. He's overwhelmed with fear and insecurity. So God commands him, hey, focus back on me. Remember the laws. Remember my promise. Remember who I am. Remember what I did. And remember the promise that I am continuing to give you. We must also take what God said to Joshua and apply it to our own lives. And when we're going through trials and tribulations, we must also remember the promise that God gave to us. We must remember who God is to us. We must remember that God is with us. And oftentimes that's hard. We don't intentionally turn our backs against God, but we get caught up in the moment. We get caught up in the task at hand. It was like, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that in order for this to happen. For some of us, it's not the issue of forgetting God's promises or ignoring his commands that's the problem. But rather, it's that we are sometimes gripped with fear. But God commands us to be strong and courageous because he's with us. And this is a promise that we need to remember. In verse 9, God says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Fear causes us to stay put, stay comfortable. It really does, right? God tells Joshua to not fear. Why does God command Joshua? Why does he continue to say these small things to him? Why does he continue to tell Joshua, hey, do not fear, do not be discouraged? Because he's fearful. He's so scared, right? He's terrified right now. This is the third time that God is saying, be strong and courageous. The third time he says, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Yes, Joshua is an extremely faithful man of God. He was the military commander under Moses. When the Israelites went out to spy out the land, him and Caleb were the only ones that said, let's do it. God gave us this land. Let's go. They were the only ones. But even for him, this was unlike anything he had ever experienced. And again, let's try to imagine what must have been going on in his mind? Would you be able to take on that responsibility with ease? It's like, oh, God told me I can do it. Yep, easy. Let's do it.
Nope.
It's that would be our dream, right? To have so much faith in God and say, you know what, God, I surrender everything. But as human beings, as sinful human beings that we are, we don't always come to that, right? Joshua can't avoid the situation. It's not like he can just walk around it and be like, you know what? I'll do it next year. God, why don't you lead him in the wilderness for 41 years, right? 41, I mean 41 and a half. Just give me a little bit more time. But that's not how it works. And what's scary is that God knows us so well that he knows what our greatest fear is. And God, being the loving God and loving Father that he is, he works on that. He deliberately puts things in front of us to test us, to grow us. And look back to who you were maybe 5 years ago. Could you imagine, those 5 years of what you went through and the time and the stress and what God did to mold you into the person that you are today? Could you have imagined that 5 years ago? And as a freshman in college, could I have imagined that I would be here? No. As a freshman, I was crazy. I was like that troublemaker all my life, just doing this, and I was like looking for fun at every corner, and I was a troublemaker, and I wreaked havoc in school and terrible relationships with my teachers. Can I imagine myself to be in this situation? But God puts us in these situations because he knows us. And that's what's scary, right? It really is scary. God knows us so well that he knows what to do. He knows what causes us to be the most uncomfortable. And so it's scary. It's like, God, I don't want this. Right? I want to just avoid it. It's our human nature to just want to avoid conflict, especially when it comes to having to change who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was writing this too, as God was reading, God is calling out to us, don't fear, don't be terrified. These words just kept coming. Don't be terrified. Don't lose hope. Don't lose sight of me, because I will always be there for you. And I was writing this, I was like tearing up. I was like, dude, God, you're right. How easy it is for me to forget. How easy it is for me to ignore you. So the question remains, how can we obey God's command? To not be terrified, to not be discouraged, when every part of my body is telling me to fear. That every part of my body is telling me, hey, you don't, like, the future? Man, that's a unknown. It's an area of unknown. Yesterday I visited Santa Cruz again, just to visit my old friends. And I have this one friend, for the 4 years that I've known him, he's always just so fearful. And even today, as he's a senior now, he's about to graduate. Things are not working well for his major right now. And what he always says to me every single year, he's always saying, hey Jay, like, I'm just scared of the unknown. I'm like, me too. Everyone is. Really. Everyone is scared of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen next week. And as Christians, we're not at an advantage. Just like, we're not saying like, hey, God's got my back. I'm his child. He's not gonna let me, go into financial burdens. He's not gonna make me, homeless, or we might have these thoughts every now and then. Oh, look, God loves me. He's not gonna do that to me. And so we have these fears of like, oh, what's gonna happen in the future? Especially post grad, it's like, yeah, like that's like real adulting, I guess. You gotta start paying you gotta pay back your loans, car payments, credit card payments, rent, and kids. Yeah, I'm not even there. I'm not even married. I'm not even dating. There's no one there. I'm just like, okay, let me just take care of this first. every step, whether we're in middle school, transitioning into high school, or high school transitioning to college, or post-grad like me, or going into marriage and having kids, at every stage of our lives, there's fear. There's fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Every stage. It's not something that we can just avoid.
Mm.
But how can we get ready? How can we, I guess, be able to confront each obstacle with confidence, with courage, with strength? It's with God. He's really the only way. Because we're able to have faith. We're not just saying, okay, God, okay, you're going to take care of me, I'm good. That's not the mentality that we have. It's like, God, despite what's going on in my life, I know that you have a plan for me. I know that you're with me. I know all these things. God, help me to get rid of my disbelief in you, in my unbelief. I want to believe in you. I want to have faith. And in a way, we are an advantage. We are at an advantage because we have a relationship with the living God. We have this relationship. We have this fellowship with him. So the question again is, how do we obey these commands to not be terrified, to not be discouraged? Right? Because again, easier said than done. Just because God says it, we read God's promises all the time. But does that just completely just take out all the fear in our lives? No. What else? How can we take this into our own lives? The last part of that passage, verse 9. We need to remind ourselves of the truth. It says, "For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." It's funny. That's like the only thing that God says. He doesn't say, "Oh, I'm this, I'm that, and because if you do this, then I'll help you do that. If you take this step, then I'll help you in this way, and in every step, then I'll help you." He just says, "I'll be with you." And that's like it's like God's a funny guy. It's like that's all he gives. He's like, "Hey, that's all the advice that you should need. I'm with you." It's like funny, as human beings, we want each step, like, okay, but if I take this step, what's gonna happen? If I go in this direction, how is it gonna turn out? And we have these fears, and we have like these, preconceived notions of, okay, if I do it go this way, then this will happen. And so which way should I take? Which direction should I go? But all God says, he says, don't fear. I know all these situations. I know you have to lead all these people into the promised land. I know that you have to step up as a leader and fill the shoes of Moses. And you're able to be strong and courageous. Why? Because I'm with you. And that's it. And in a way, it's like, what? That's it? But that's it. It really is. And it's kind of funny. I could kind of laugh at that a little bit. It's like, oh, God, you're a funny guy. He's interesting. Yeah, it's just funny. It's like, okay, I got it. All right, you're right. You are with me every step.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hold on to that.
So he's telling you, don't worry.
Right? Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, it's like, hey, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Full circle. Full circle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah, God, yeah. He's an interesting. He's an interesting guy. But anyways, all right. We need to take active steps in remembering God's promises to us. But not just remembering them. We can memorize a whole bunch of verses.
Mm.
Like this, Joshua 1:9, it was a song that I learned back in elementary school in VBS.
You don't have to.
It's very sorry. It just goes like, "Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be terrified, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." So I know it.
There you go,
I
bro.
learned it in elementary school.
There
But
you
do I apply it? Have I acknowledged that ever since elementary school? Did I read those lyrics and sing these songs and do body worship and say, "Yeah, God, you're with me every step of the way"? No, it's just, we know a lot of verses. We know. Someone says, like, "Oh, John 3:16." Oh yeah, I know that verse. For a long time, I lived a very hypocritical life. Grew up as a pastor's kid. But I was far from living it out. And came to a point when I was so far off from God that my mom, I told Ryan this story in my personal story, but my mom, she accused me of being a Pharisee because of the hypocritical life that I was living. So you go to college and you're a part of this fellowship, this ministry on campus, and you're saying, hey, let's do this, let's go witnessing, let's share the gospel, let's go to these praise nights, let's do this, and you come home and all you do is play games. You haven't even opened up your Bible. And those were the exact words that she said to me. And after realizing that, and after rededicating my life to Christ and saying, God, you're right, I want to surrender my life to you. It was actually at that time where I committed my life to full-time ministry. And I say, okay, God, I want to serve I want to give everything, all of my life, to serving you. And it was at that moment when I would read John 3:16 and it would have a whole new meaning in my life. It wasn't just the most famous verse that everyone knows, not like even non-Christians. Now it meant something to me. Jesus died for me. After everything that I did, God sent his only son to die for me so that I can have a relationship with him. It had a whole new meaning. After 18 years, I was like, oh, now I get it. So same with this verse, Joshua 1:9. We know that verse. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. We know this verse. But has it taken new meaning in your life? Has it really impacted you? Is God's word living inside of you? And a lot of times it's not. That's why in Deuteronomy, like I shared earlier, God's telling them, write them on your foreheads, on your door frames. Tell them to your children when you're walking out at night, when you're doing this, when you're doing that. Constantly, let it never leave your lips. And my mom would always tell me, she was like, you need to pray all the time. When you wake up, when you're showering, when you're walking to the bus, walking to class, giving thanks, constantly. Because I was so prone to living my own life. And I did do that. I tried my best to do that. And it really does change how you live. It really does change your lifestyle, how you look at things. And so going back again, we can't just memorize the verse. Or do you believe it to be truth in your life? Do you really hold that? In times of tribulations, can you look to that promise and find peace? Find peace in trusting in God. Joshua was put in a situation that caused him to lose hope. It caused him to lose sight of God. It caused him to look at himself and see all these flaws and say, look at me. I can't do this. I can't do that. And you know what God replies? You're right. You can't do it. You're nothing. You're And we can see that because he says, be strong and courageous, and you will do all these things because I will be with you. And I just want to end this message with just these words of encouragement, these calls to action. In every stage of our lives, whether it's post-grad or being a grandparent, being a husband, we have fears as a given. But God is encouraging us to not look to ourselves, but look to him. For strength to keep on pushing, the peace of knowing that God is with us. I've been saying that so many times. God is with us, God is with us, God is with us. Because we need to emphasize that. We need to remind ourselves constantly. We are only able to be strong and courageous because God is with us. Don't find strength and courage in yourselves. We're limited in that way. We're imperfect. We need to look to God. Remember who he is. Have faith that he will lift you up. He will strengthen you. He will guide you. And he led you to this exact moment for a reason. He won't just drop you off and leave you. Our God is faithful. Our God is trustworthy. And he is with us every step